America. Chris, we started around the world in 80 games in my motherland of Denmark, and now we are in your motherland, the land of your mother, the United States of your mother.
We are indeed. For anyone that doesn't know, I am half American by blood. Yes. Yeah, not by birth. I'm 100% UK-ish, UKian, Great British, by birth, locale. But yeah, I am American by half.
Whereabouts in America is your mum from?
Ohio.
There you go. Ohio. Hey, do you want to know some facts about America?
Definitely.
I'm now terrified after the Pokemon debacle where I got some misinformation. I'm a bit worried about stating facts about countries. So I went on to the official United States of America government website to get some government approved facts about the country.
Yep.
So verified facts about America. It's the greatest country in the world.
Obviously.
Freedom is free. And also, guns don't kill people. They are not the problem. If anything, we need more guns. Says.
I've heard that too.
And of course, it can only be known as the President of the United States of America if it is a bloated, narcissistic tangerine from the actual United States of America. Otherwise, he should technically be known as Orangina.
Is Orangina a British drink or is it a worldwide?
I don't know. It might be.
So,
do you want to know some actual facts about America?
Yeah. Well, that was good though.
It's a bit, isn't it? For almost 100 years, it was illegal to serve cherry pie with ice cream in Kansas, apparently. Something to do with the temperance movement and dissuading indulgence. Speaking of indulgence, over 8 million slices of pizza are served in the US every day, which equates to about 100 acres of pizza.
Wow.
Yep. The states of Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Montana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Wyoming, and North and South Dakota all have more cows than people.
That's nice. I like cows.
Isn't it? And of course, it can only be known as a New York minute if it is a psychological temporal obfuscation caused by the general busyness of the city of New York. Otherwise, it should technically be known as a sparkling jiffy. As an additional fact, a jiffy is an actual measurement of time.
Is it?
Yep, it's used to measure the period of an alternating current power cycle, which equates to a 50th of a second. Or,
very
if you're in the US, a 60th of a second.
That's a pretty good joke as well.
Yeah. It's true.
50 or 60? What?
Yeah, because it's AC, 50 hertz and 60 hertz, isn't it?
Oh yes, okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking purely about like TV refresh rates back in the 90s, but I suppose that's the same reason, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wanker.
Do you want to talk about games, Chris?
What
are all the games that have ever been made in the US, Chris?
Right, so it's a big list. No, it's be insane. The USA, this one has been pretty horrendous to cover. That's why we put it off for so long. Every other place we've talked about so far, I could at least put something together that was kind of semi-educated, a pithy roundup of a few games people might know, a few they might not. And in some cases, I could kind of try and offer like a sweeping generalization about a developer's style or something even the broader national approach might be to kind of game design. But America, this is less a case of pulling big names and saying, oh, did you know that Atari were American? And more a case of me foolishly standing up at the front of the class and going, right, today we're going to summarize video games because it's big. The American games industry isn't just large. It is unarguably really the backbone of modern gaming as we know it. So everything from the birth of home consoles originally to the rise of online play to the billion-dollar kind of blockbuster franchise that we have now, America's fingerprints are all over the very best and the very worst of the whole games industry. It's almost everything has ended up coming from there in the way we recognize it now. So this will be a quick, not that quick, to be honest, but wildly incomplete tour through some key moments and some key studios that defined some bits of gaming in the United States. And by extension, the world, like I said, because it has had a big influence. So we'll go right back. In the 70s and the early 80s, all about the arcades. it's quite interesting that of the 20 countries we've already covered, few, if any of them, really made any particular splashes in an arcade setting. But evolving from pinball parlors, the American arcade, similar yet very distinct to kind of the parallel evolution of the Japanese arcade, was the real birth of the American games industry as a whole. So indeed, even when home consoles became standard, and I'm sort of jumping forward a bit here, replicating arcade experiences was kind of the mission for a long time on home consoles in America, even as Japanese developers pushed more for kind of role-playing and character development and stuff like that in the late 80s. America was more about, can we play Space Invaders at home properly yet? Can we play these games I recognize, but in my house? And in the arcade, one name towered above all of the rest. It was Atari at the start, and they were essentially the first true household name in games. Like, you could make the argument in the US, at least, that company basically invented the commercial side of the industry, like cornerstone stuff. So in terms of games, they were responsible for Pong and Asteroids and Centipede, like all these arcade classics. And for a long time, they rode seriously high. And as much as Nintendo became the term that was, synonymous with video game when the NES launched, Atari was the same placeholder in the late 70s and early 80s. Are you playing your Atari? That kind of thing. Through a sort of megalomaniacal hubris. Through a sort of megalomaniacal hubris, Atari also gave us one of the gaming's biggest cautionary tales, because as the 80s rolled on, the company had overextended. They flooded the market with rushed, not very good games. And it culminated in the story that even the most amateur games historians probably know, that the tie-in game E.T. the Extraterrestrial was printed at such high volumes and selling in such low quantities that tens of thousands of the carts were stuffed in landfill. This was a story that was once thought apocryphal, but was substantiated in 2014 as part of a Microsoft-funded documentary, because they dug up the desert until they found them. And there they were, all these carts. This period is now known as the video game crash of 1983, when confidence in games had plummeted so far and the industry was just looking like it was completely done, like imploded overnight almost. Of course, it was our pals in Japan that would save the day, because Nintendo came along and went, would you like the NES? It's not video games, it's an entertainment system. And video games as a term had become so toxic in America that American retail really liked that this wasn't a game in the same way, even if it was. And it took a bit of time to kind of get up to speed, but by the mid-80s, the NES was selling like gangbusters, and then it became the turn of American developers, once at the top of the pile, to basically beg Nintendo for development licenses. So Nintendo were very closed for a long while to say, we make the games, or we license very specific people to make games for us. And it was everyone in America going, can we ever go, please? Because you're making an awful lot of money now. So
it's
Nintendo,
nice that we've got that now with all of these devs trying to get hold of Switch 2 dev kits.
basically.
Oh, the good old days.
Basically. So Nintendo stole the retail headlines for a lot of that decade, but American studios were quietly kind of rebuilding too, but in very different directions at first. A couple big names from that recovery period: Sierra and LucasArts. They were working on home computers, because home computers had weathered the video games crash because they did other jobs. The need for spreadsheets and accounting software essentially saved the games industry, because these companies could say, well, that's still in the house, so maybe we just make a little game for that now. But Sierra gave us King's Quest and Space Quest and Leisure Suite Larry, all like very important point and click games, all full of personality and wit and the kind of try everything on everything puzzles that define a whole generation of adventure games. They were obviously refined then by LucasArts, who I mentioned, with Monkey Island, Day of the Tentacle, Grim Fandango. Like, these titles extend well into the 90s, but crucially were hits not just because the machines that they were played on, but because they had moved basically 180 degrees away from the reflex-based gameplay of the arcade. It had really sent the whole industry in a different direction. It wasn't that arcade on its own had become poisonous, but there was a very clear through line from Atari shitting out thousands of anomalous Breakout and Space Invader clones to LucasArts finding like huge success with puzzly narrative games. I think it's very obvious how that kind of worked when you look back. Going back a little bit further, over on the publishing side, we had the birth of Electronic Arts in the early 80s. This was EA started with surprisingly artistic intentions. Like, the company's whole pitch was to treat game developers as almost like rock stars. They put like people's faces and names on box art, and that really hadn't been done before. So very progressive for the time, considering Atari outright banned coders from including credits of any kind in their early games. Like, one of the earliest recorded Easter eggs is the Atari 2600 game Adventure, because you can find a hidden room that references its designer's name, Warren Robinette. And other than that, they weren't allowed to put in that they made the game. It wasn't in the manual, it wasn't in the back of the box, it wasn't in the game itself. For EA, though, they soon shed their humble, noble roots and now one of the biggest machines in the industry because they own everything. They own Codemasters and PopCap and Maxis, and they're the parent of EA Sports. And that means whether you're enjoying Dirt Rally or Peggle or The Sims 4 or Battlefield or FIFA or whatever it's fucking called, or Madden, like you're lining the pockets of that juggernaut. And as of very recently, EA themselves were essentially purchased through an astonishingly high-value leveraged buyout, which means that technically we can also cover EA when we do Saudi Arabia. So that's cool and healthy, isn't it?
Yeah. Look forward to that one.
Yeah. So, reversing a little again, back to the early days of PC gaming, Texas-based id Software basically invented the first-person shooter as we know it. So Wolfenstein 3D and then Doom and then Quake, they are all genre-shaping works. They also pioneered the shareware model to sell these games, just giving away the first chunk of the game for free and then charging for the rest. And shareware copies of Doom were so prevalent around the world at that kind of early time, installed on basically all functional computers, that it also inadvertently birthed modding communities and online multiplayer because everyone suddenly had network machines and they all had Doom. So it was just a case of saying, can we make them talk to each other then? And that was, the beginning of, again, online gaming as we know it today. You can essentially draw a straight line from Doom to Call of Duty to Fortnite to whatever else people are playing now. Speaking of Call of Duty, that's another huge American export that reshaped the world. Infinity Ward and the revolving door of studios that followed. So you've got Treyarch, you've got Sledgehammer, you've got probably others, but I don't care. they built an empire out of like the cinematic first-person shooter, and Modern Warfare in particular on the 360 and the PS3 turned first-person shooter games into the dominant mainstream genre. And whether you think that's a good thing or not, its influence is undeniable. Talking cultural impact, we also kind of have to mention Rockstar because they're not American. Rockstar, at least in our metrics, remains a British company by kind of birth. But Rockstar North, as the founding home studio, being in Edinburgh, they're the spiritual and creative base for GTA and everything else. But the company's internal network is now so sprawling that specific companies and specific games are very much the products of other places in the world. So Rockstar San Diego made Red Dead Redemption. And it's not saying there was no influence from other places, but it's a big thing. And it was predominantly made by people in the US. And it's also in the US, I guess, that the company's tone and themes and business heft have kind of rooted themselves as well. Like the GTA series especially, it's kind of a love letter to and a satire of American life. When I was kind of thinking what I was going to play for this month's episode, I said to Georgia, like, America's such a big place. And she was like, GTA, obviously. And it's like, yeah, but it's not. It's just not eligible. But the whole thing is about as American as it gets, even if its passport says otherwise. It really does feel like that. Then a few more. You've got Blizzard, or nowadays Activision Blizzard, big California heavyweight developer responsible for Warcraft, for StarCraft, for Diablo, for Overwatch, and of course, World of Warcraft, which basically brought MMOs mainstream in the same way that Doom did for the first-person shooter. For years, we had Doom clones, and then for years later, we had World of Warcraft clones because they became the archetypes for their respective genres. Having mentioned Activision Blizzard and EA, of course, we have to talk about Microsoft because they've always been involved in PC hardware and software, but their move into games hardware with the Xbox in 2001 completely changed the console landscape. The original Xbox was essentially a contemporary PC in a big box. And it was big, and the controller was big, in the same way that American cars are double the width of cars produced everywhere else in the world for no reason at all. It just felt unapologetically American. And as a result, Microsoft brought us games like Halo, because they published the Bungie-created game, became an instant icon. Master Chief, still a character that is referenced and talked about and exists. And the success of kind of Xbox Live basically built the template for modern online console gaming. If Doom did it for kind of home computers, Xbox Live was, birthed by Microsoft. That said, it is hard to ignore how rough things have been for Xbox lately. After 20 plus years in the console race, it really feels like Microsoft has lost sight of what its brand is. Like the Series X and S era has been plagued by identity issues. There's been big droughts between exclusives. Every game now is essentially launching on all rival platforms. So they've given up on exclusives as a thing. Game Pass.
And old stuff being ported on as well.
Yes, mad, isn't it? Game Pass, which whilst, consumer first in concept, it felt like, seems to have essentially cannibalized its own software sales. Because, Xbox now make no money from games, but also don't build a new audience either. Because people that are on Game Pass use Game Pass, people that aren't don't want it because the prices have just gone up. So it's kind of a lose-lose on that front as well. And it's hard to say at this stage if Xbox continues as a hardware platform for more than maybe one additional generation. Like
Yeah.
Microsoft may own half the studios in the world now through acquisitions of Bethesda, of Activision, but it hasn't really shifted the needle. Like they're not the big deal they once were in the same way. Back to games. I will wrap up soon, I promise. Scanning across genres, you can trace America's influence pretty much everywhere. The immersive sim, you've got Thief, System Shock, their descendants like Deus Ex, Bioshock, they come out of Looking Glass Studios. The open world action adventure, obviously Rockstar with their dubious global background play a huge part in that, but Bethesda too, The Elder Scrolls, Fallout, that's where those games came from as well. And if we look at the modern cinematic story-driven blockbuster, Naughty Dog, I guess, are probably one of the big kind of names in that. They basically wrote the modern playbook with Uncharted and The Last of Us and stuff like that. And even the indie boom of the 2010s, so breakout successes like Braid or Super Meat Boy or Fez, and then modern hits like Undertale and Stardew Valley, they're all predominantly American creators and teams that have led that charge. Sports and racing, whether it's realistic or arcadey, pretty much all US made. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Neversoft, EA Sports Games, 2K Sports Games, even the core Forza games. Not Horizon, though. That came from the UK, but the original Forza games, all America. And let's not forget Valve up in Seattle, because not only did they give us genuine all-timers like Half-Life, Portal, Team Fortress, Left 4 Dead, they also gave us Steam, which at this point is PC gaming. Everyone else that has tried to dethrone Steam has failed quite miserably. Epic's efforts to essentially say, we'll just give you games every month. They're all free. Can't make people sign up, which is bananas, like genuinely bananas. So yeah, Gabe Newell and Valve, they've spent decades now blurring the line between developer, platform holder, and now with the Steam Deck, hardware manufacturers as well. So
yeah,
real domination, but we like them for some reason. They're like the acceptable face of capitalism. I don't know why.
Yeah.
If there's one thread running through all this, though, it's scale and maybe sometimes forced reinvention, because American game development has always been big, quite brash a lot of the time, ambitious, occasionally self-destructive. It's this kind of cycle of development, occasional collapse, reinvention, and then domination in some ways. And that, I guess, is like you joked about the stuff on the American government website. It's kind of the American way. Is how a lot of kind of like the pillars of freedom are presented. And it's weird that it does bear out that clearly in kind of like an industry like this as well. Final shout outs, Epic Games, like I mentioned, they have their own store that no one cares about. But God bless them, they have given us Fortnite and its infinite content model.
God.
And alongside that, also the Unreal Engine that half the industry runs on. That's a big deal. The other half of 2025, so the other half of games in 2025 are probably running on Unity, which is technically Danish. So if anyone, as you mentioned earlier, knows our bloodlines, we're pretty much covered. The two of us have a hand in all games. Obsidian and In Exile have been keeping the flame alive for classic RPGs. Double Fine and Tim Schafer have kept the flag flying for kind of offbeat, sometimes heartfelt indie in inverted commas projects like Psychonauts. The recent Keeper looks really good. And even Telltale, who briefly, oh dear, burping through that. And even Telltale, who briefly revived the adventure game for a whole new audience before collapsing under their own success, were American too. So that is my non-exhaustive, but feels exhaustive, attempt to summarize the US as neatly as possible in games. It's a mess, but through this lens, you can basically trace the evolution of the whole medium. The highs and lows, the innovation, but also the excess, the hubris, which does kind of feel about right for America. Of the quite literally 100 billion potential candidates that you could have played this month, what did you play, Jonathan Dunn?
Hades 2, spoke about it earlier.
Easy peasy.
It's tempting, just to save me on editing, to be honest.
There's no rush to get this one out. Might as well put it out at the end of the next month.
Maybe, yeah. So I decided to go with the obvious. I wanted to play a Call of Duty game
Bang, bang.
because I've never really played one of these games, not properly anyway. I've said before that I don't really do online multiplayer stuff, and I found other better single player campaign stuff to scratch that itch. Combined with the fact that the single player stuff in Call of Duty games seem to have become an increasingly lower priority than the online multiplayer live servicey stuff, which is understandable when you look at where this franchise makes its money. And like I said, there's plenty of other games to fulfill the first person action shaped hole in my life. So I'm not begrudging these games that they're not for me. But I wanted to sample one with a bit more of a critical eye and see if I could spot a way into them for me. There's obviously a huge back catalogue of Call of Duty games to choose from since they became an annualized affair, which, looking into it, was basically immediately, because the biggest gap between games, which was 2 years, came between Call of Duty and Call of Duty 2. And ever since then, they've released a game every year, bringing the total to 22 games, which have been helmed by, as you touched on, roving cycle of developers, Treyarch, Infinity Ward, doing most of them, Raven Software, Sledgehammer Games chipping in to make sure the franchise hits its quota. The choice of which one to play for me was easy to make because one of the games was included as a PS Plus monthly game a few months back, which was 2020's Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, which is Call of Duty Black Ops 5, essentially, the Black Ops sub-series, leaping about all over the place with its timeline and settings to try and give a wide variety of narrative experiences. The variety of the gaming experience seems to be largely identical, with the standard Call of Duty combat throughout. Yep, guns, maybe a bang-bang. Black Ops Cold War is set during, have a guess.
Cold War.
That's right, the chilly winter of 2020 in Warwick. No, it's set in the 80s. You play... It's set in the 80s. You play as the all-American, whatever, dispatched by a very... dispatched by an admittedly very impressively well-rendered Ronald Reagan to hunt down a Soviet spy known only as Perseus. Reading reviews, the campaign came under some criticism for its length, which is apparently only about, I don't know, somewhere between 4 and 6 hours, which is fine by me. I don't mind a short game. Understandably underwhelming if you bought the game entirely for the single-player aspect, but as we know, 90% of people buying these games are playing, for the online experience, which I'll come on to. But I want to talk a little bit about the campaign first, which was pretty much exactly as I expected.
There's
a lot of running about, shooting, throwing grenades, hiding, stealthing, sneaking, gadgeting, that sort of stuff. It obviously all works well and is pretty good. This was the first of the Call of Duty games that was on this current generation of hardware. Come on to that. It generally sets up the gameplay loop to be play a bit, watch a bit, play a bit, watch a bit, make a choice, watch a bit, watch a bit, watch a bit, play a bit. It's what most AAA games are these days with, the cinematic nature of the narrative, wanting to show off as many AAA elements as possible. And that's even more so in this game, being the first of, it's the first Call of Duty game to be on this current generation of hardware. And obviously it's dripping in budget, but it does sort of structure, it feels like it structures a lot of the gameplay over showing that off. The classic slowing you down wherever it can to walk through environments that obviously look incredible, but just let me play. When it does let you play, it's good. And actually, to be fair, my favourite bits of the game so far have been the bits where I've opted to take a slower approach, doing the stealthier strategic option rather than going all guns blazing. But taking the game slowly. In the words of Alan Partridge, I don't mind playing games slowly, but I want it to be my decision. I would say use a sausage as a breakwater, but some of the German set events in this game, I don't want to come across as that racist guy in Peep Show. Daryl, that's it. The stealthier options are never as in-depth as something like Hitman, so it's a bit more straightforward and immediate to play the game like that. The story and overall setting and narratives of the 80s Cold War is great. There are some great Cold War thriller and war movies that I've loved. It hits all of the cliches of those quite nicely. It is in desperate need of some 80s needle drops, though, to properly sell me on that experience. But it does, give you a nice bit of time in the sort of slow smoking room strategization side of this world, which I also love. It's not quite the American equivalent of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but you do end up spending a decent bit of time actually between missions, sort of reviewing facts and looking at where to go next and hatching plans for the next mission, which obviously it's all semi-scripted and guided, but there's just enough interaction to make you feel like it's at least a bit organic, and I like that. I think that like the big bugbear for me, and I'm still not sure where I land on this, is to do with and not to get too political, but like it's the glamorization of the military and war in general. Like, I saw somebody at Halloween. I went to like a pumpkin festival-y Halloween thing, and the kids running around with toy guns, and it's just that weird. Like, it's weird to me. Obviously, in this country, it's very different. But also, annoyingly, it is very fun to shoot bad guys.
Oh yeah,
That's the thing.
I as a slight aside, I went for a stag weekend a number of years ago now, but as part of it, one of the activities was we went to like a shooting range, and never shot a gun before in any context. And I was like, I just feel really weird about this because, I always see myself as, I might play games that have guns in them, but I think, I'd like to think of myself as a pacifist. I wouldn't want to fight anyone. I wouldn't want to shoot anything. So we went, you set up, you've got your shotgun, the little clay pigeon goes up. As soon as I hit one, I was like, well, that's the best thing I've ever done in my life. So it's a real, it's a real problem. But the guns feel really good.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
Shooting a bit of clay out of the sky, unbelievable.
Yeah. Like, obviously in this game, everything's being set up for you to feel like an absolute hero.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I don't know where the line is with this sort of thing. I guess it will depend on the person playing it, how it affects them or influences them. I spoke like way back when, actually, when we were doing our rankings about like the difference between something like This War of Mine and the importance of having a game like that actually shows like the reality of war. It's not just, but the thing I will say for me is that like the Call of Duty games kind of want to have their cake and eat it in terms of glamorizing, war and fighting and the military, but also making it dark and gritty and have you make complicated moral choices, but also then have trophy achievements pop up when you do. So there's no point wringing your hands over whether to throw a suspect off the roof or spare him for interrogation, because when you do choose to throw him off the roof, as I did, it sort of presents as a bit of a dark human moment. And then ding ding, trophy achievement. Like something like Counter-Strike, whilst on the surface can look very similar to something like the Call of Duty games, very much knows it's a game. It doesn't try and be something that it's not. Whereas I think the devs of the Call of Duty games would love to make people cry and think, whilst also making them want to sign up to the army. So the campaign it's slick, it's very well presented and cool. The tonal nature of it is as iffy as any other modern war game. But I think having it set in a different time period probably helps sell it a bit more as a fantasy genre experience rather than a realistic depiction of what it would be like to be these characters. I almost certainly won't play the campaign to completion, so its length actually doesn't matter to me.
An hour is all
doesn't
I
matter. Exactly. Yeah, I played 2 hours of who knows what percent of that it is. The multiplayer side of the game, then, it is utterly impenetrable to a man pushing 40 with no experience in these type of games. Doesn't help that the main menu of the game gives you the choice to play about 20 different things. Not just campaign, multiplayer, and zombies mode of Cold War, but it presents other Call of Duty games like they are a viable option to launch into as well. There's like the free-to-play Warzone, Call of Duty Warzone, obviously. You can just launch that. And then it also is like, hey, do you want to jump into Season 1 of Call of Duty Vanguard or join this current seasonal event of Modern Warfare? And you're like, okay. And it's like, hey, go ahead, 50 quid, on your way. I tried the normal multiplayer mode of Black Ops Cold War and the zombies mode, and I enjoyed the zombies mode a lot more because it's got a bit more structure to it. It's got a bit of a roguelike edge to it as well, and you get sort of like various upgrades and whatnot. The more zombie waves you survive. I think playing that with friends would probably be quite fun. The normal multiplayer mode though is just baffling. I mean, it immediately presented me with lots of different things to play, or mostly things to buy for in-game currency, out-of-game currency. I think a little man popped out of my PlayStation at one point and pickpocketed me. The funny thing is that, like having been bit baffled by by the multiplayer side of this, reading reviews of the game, the multiplayer side of this game was very heavily criticized for taking things back to basics too much. I mean, like, obviously, joking aside, I understand the standard different multiplayer modes like deathmatch and escort missions and capture the flag or whatever. I don't actually know if that's in there. Obviously, like, joining any online community after a little bit of time, let alone 5 years, means that you're going to be a seal pup in a lion enclosure. But because these are annualized games, and the new multiplayer sides of these games are basically just the next lot of features and maps of the previous one with maybe a few more features, so it's it's not like if I bought the new Call of Duty game, I'd be on the same plane as everyone else starting the game. Like, I am never going to be good enough to play it online in these games, and there will never be a way for me to familiarize myself with the game enough to get up to scratch. I totally understand that these games are hugely popular, obviously very well made. Any bones of contention in the minutiae of the mechanics are down to the fact that the changes are so granular between versions. Certainly the multiplayer side of things, much like playing FIFA games, it's like it just becomes a matter of taste more than anything else. But if nothing else, it's nice for me to have it's nice for me to have a cast iron reminder that these types of games are just not for me. And I will say I'm glad that I have the freedom of speech to say that.
Ronald Reagan would be proud.
What did you play?
I think my choice this month might have been, I don't think it could be more opposite to yours. I genuinely don't think, I think if you had like a sort of continuum scale, we are literally at both ends with our choices this month. Main reason, after writing the notes on the USA, I just needed to fucking rest. So I was racking my brains for something that felt a bit more me. And my pick this month is a puzzle game called Zoop. That's ZOOP. It is a puzzle game adventure that few, if any, have heard of, despite it being a game that launched on absolutely every platform in the mid-90s. Like, I owned it on the Mega Drive as a kid. It also came out for the SNES and the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn and the Game Boy and DOS computers, and even the Atari Jaguar. It only had about 40 games, and one of them is Zoop.
Jesus.
Like, it's a kind of reflex-based puzzle game from a developer. I don't know if they did anything else. They're called Hookstone. It was published by Viacom, like the entertainment brand, in 95. And they were fiercely pursuing this as America's answer to Tetris, essentially. That was the pitch, by the way. Like, Viacom were pushing and marketing Zoop as America's favorite puzzle game before anyone in America had actually played it. Like, on the box of the US PlayStation release, there's a quote attributed to no one that reads, "America's largest killer of time." And when you look closely, you'll see that it has a little TM after it, meaning that they basically trademarked their own phrase for marketing purposes before anyone outside of maybe a few focus groups had actually touched it. I guess the idea was to create this bright and bold alternative to like the slightly more sterile design of Tetris. And it is way more twitchy, it's fast paced, it's reflex first as a puzzle game. It's a bit like Columns, bizarrely the second time that game's come up today after its reference when I was talking about Sonic Eraser.
You just need it to come up a third time and it'll disappear.
But it's like Columns mashed with Tempest. A game I do like from the arcade, Atari's Tempest. It influenced basically all of the Jeff Minter stuff. So it's like an important game in a way for me. You control a little triangle in the center of the screen. You're able to move in 4 directions around a small grid, and you can zoop, that's to kind of fire off in either the north, south, east, or west from where you start in the center. Coloured shapes are always advancing from the sides. You press any button on the pad to zoop, like I said, and you will take on the colour of whatever piece you touch. So if your piece is blue and you zoop into a row of blue shapes, you'll clear them all. If a green piece is just behind the blues, you will munch all the blue bits and then you will change to green. So you'll then need to look for a green piece to kind of zoop into next. So it's constantly about kind of like balancing what colour have I got, what do I need to manage, which stacks are high that I need to reduce, and everything else. At low levels, it's really simple. straightforward. The game generates a lot of kind of very kind patterns of just like the same colors in a row. But a few stages in, it becomes oddly aggressive for a puzzle game, like very quickly gets out of hand. And Tetris, I think, one of its real skills is that if you play it from level 0, it has a very good difficulty curve in most versions. Like an average player, you will feel the speed increase, but with a bit of practice, you should be able to get to kind of level 9 or 10 in a Tetris game. And then you might start to kind of like make a few mistakes, but it ramps up really nicely to that point. But in Zoop, it's very possible to trip over your own fingers and get caught in a loop of just picking up the wrong colors again and again and again, just a few minutes into a game.
Well, that's how I feel being colorblind.
I mean, they are all different shapes as well, so that would help you. So there is that to kind of assist. Now, this may sound a bit confusing in audio form. I guarantee if anyone looks at a screenshot, it will make sense immediately. Like it's quite easy to read once you look at it. The aesthetic of the whole thing, very much 90s Nickelodeon, which I kind of dig. And it does make sense because Viacom were the parent company for Nickelodeon. So there's every possibility they did that intentionally. The music too, no matter the version you're playing on, is pretty great. Like obviously platforms like the Saturn and the PlayStation have CD audio, but the versions of the songs condensed down for the SNES or the Game Boy, they're pretty toe tapping as well. Like I've enjoyed the versions I tried. I think Zoop is really fascinating as a cultural artifact. Not really just as a game, but as kind of an early attempt at forcing the manufacture of a national hit. You know, as a spoiler, it didn't do very well at all. Never received any sort of sequel after this big push. And it absolutely did not become America's Tetris because Tetris became America's Tetris when the Tetris company was established and formed the year after Zoop released in the US. But it's still a charming little time capsule, I think, of 90s US industry optimism all the same. You know, it was essentially taking a serviceable but unremarkable product, flooding the market so people were forced to engage with it, either through word of mouth or through ads or whatever. And then the expectation was just like, oh, I guess we profit now. And that didn't happen. But I do like Zoop. You know, I was never very good at it on the Mega Drive as a kid, but I've made kind of a concerted effort these last few weeks to try and get a bit better. And there are kind of power-ups to try and strategically use that I'd never understood as a kid. But it allows you to maybe like get rid of all of a certain color on one side or a whole row, regardless of what colors are built up and things like that. And there's also scoring strategies to kind of like deliberately leaving a long chain of the same color, because if you zoop through all of them, like start to back, you get a bigger score and things like that. Like it's not got the mechanical simplicity and therefore mechanical depth of Tetris, because there's a bit too much to manage to ever be comfortable to like learn properly. And I do wonder if restricting the game's kind of less lanes of attack at lower difficulties would have made it more inviting for people to try and get better at. Like maybe starting with just the upper part and then add the bottom and then the east and west bits later. But we'll never know because no one cares about Zoop. And I would be genuinely surprised if any media outlet of any size, like our size or smaller, has talked about Zoop this calendar year other than me. So that's my contribution. America, thanks for Zoop. Thanks for Call of Duty. It's got to be bedtime now.
I think you should double down on your Zoopness and try and get all the retro achievements for every single version of Zoop.
There's a few on there, and obviously because I've been playing it on my little handheld, I've unlocked a few achievements. It's just so hard. Like the sort of top tier, you look at kind of what the expectation is, and it seems like, oh, getting to level 15 or 16 is not going to be very hard. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. Like I've really tried, and I just can't do it.
Do you think it would take you longer to do that or beat Sekiro?
I think I would find it easier to persevere with Zoop, bizarrely. Because I've been thinking about this a lot, not just in relation to kind of Zoop and stuff like that, but when a game is bigger and also might have a narrative thread, and it also has like more variety, essentially. You know, something like Sekiro, I know you were essentially doing the same thing. You were working out how to kind of better work through encounters, but it does feel different each time. And the bit that I think I really struggle with is like I could beat a big boss like I did in Elden Ring, and then knowing how long it took me and knowing that the next one might be the same again, but different enough that I'm basically starting from scratch, I find that really hard. Whereas Tetris, I can play a game like that endlessly because it's like, I know the rules aren't going to change. So it's just about, can I lock in and get better at doing that thing? Nothing on screen is going to be any different. And I find it very soothing in a way that I don't find playing bigger games like that. So
it's weird that out of the two of us, I'm the one with OCD. Isn't it?
I just like Tetris. I've
They
played
all do.
again going on holiday this last week. A big part of this is that been quite a stressful month or two, few months maybe, and I thought, okay, me and George can have a nice few days where we just relax. We'll kind of go all out. We'll kind of really pamper ourselves for a couple of days. I felt more relaxed on the final day when I woke up early and I played through all of Tetris Effect's journey mode before Georgia woke up than I did the day before when I was having an hour and a half massage. And there's something about it. It's like my body felt better, obviously having a massage, and it was like, there's a lot of tension there. This feels good to kind of like try and release it a bit. But Tetris Effect releases something in my brain that the massage couldn't. And yeah, there's something about puzzle games that really just hits something in my brain that very few other things scratch, and very, very few other things kind of really help me through challenging times. And yeah, it's no surprise that as I've just gone back to school, literally today, it's my first day back for the new term, played a lot of Tetris the last few days.